Okay. And by the way, when it isn't when it is recording like this, I can always edit out sections. So that's the great thing about technology today. Good day, everyone. Welcome to Euphonium Summit for Farm for Dreams. I have Brian Meixner with me.
Let's start over. My name is Meixner.
Meixner. Perfect. Yeah. I've been listening for audio cues and stuff like that, and going into YouTube videos and seeing if I could hear any like pronunciations. So Meixner.
Yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm.
Cool. It's like Waxahachie and Mahia. So take two. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Euphonium Summit from Farm for Dreams. I have Brian Meixner.
It's Meixner.
Meixner.
So say Mike.
Meixner.
Say Mike and say Snur. Meixner.
Meixner. Mm-hmm. Okay. Hi everybody, welcome to Euphonium Summit with Farm for Dreams. This is Brian Meixner with me from High Point University, and brass band conductor extraordinaire, and so many more. Brian Meixner is an active euphonium soloist, chamber musician, conductor, and educator, currently professor of music and director of instrumental studies at High Point University. His duties at High Point University include conducting the HPU Community Orchestra, wind ensemble, brass ensemble, and teaching chamber music and low brass studio. Brian is also the founder, executive director, and conductor of the North Carolina Brass Band, a professional ensemble comprised of many of the finest brass players and percussionists in North Carolina. Brian has a national reputation as both a conductor and performer with several professional and university ensembles, and has been featured euphonium soloist and chamber musician at many national and international music conferences and festivals. In addition, Brian has numerous recordings to his credit, including roles as conductor, soloist, and chamber musician. Links will all be provided below. Thank you for joining us today, Brian.
Thank you for having me.
Outstanding. As I develop these questions that we're going through, it's basically to reach current and future students of euphonium who are starting and progressing on their journey as they are finding themselves today. And for those who have parents that are looking for any way to give their student that advantage over the next, and even give them something they never had. So you're teaching at High Point University currently, and you were discussing with me earlier in a previous conversation that you have a Bachelor of Arts program for euphonium.
Yeah, so I've been on faculty here. I'm about to start my 12th year on faculty. I'm director of instrumental studies, as you had mentioned. And yes, we have a Bachelor of Arts in Music degree. It's sort of an all-encompassing degree. Our sort of goal here is to develop the full musician. And so, within the degree program, students can choose a variety of different options. Performance is certainly one of them on any instrument, business path, other types of things, technology. And so the curriculum has a lot of electives and sort of a lot of options and flexibility to sort of meet the student where they are. And there's so many different students with differing interests and goals within the music field. And so this is, that's the way we approach things. Yeah.
That's really awesome. So let's dive into your euphonium playing a little bit. I know you've progressed on your path and journey with euphonium through many stages. When you started, what age did you start playing euphonium or baritone?
I was in the 6th grade, through the public school program. And it's funny, when they were recruiting the 5th graders, to play, they brought us into the auditorium and they had these high school kids come up, and play a little ditty on their instrument. And this oboe student came up there and just sounded amazing and beautiful. And so we had to list our top three instruments that we wanted to play. And I had oboe as number 1.
Wow.
And trumpet as number 2. and I put Euphonium as number 3 because the Euphonium kid actually sounded pretty amazing too. And so I went in, with the band directors, and they said, "Oh, form a buzz," and I did, and they said, "Oh, you're low brass, so you play euphonium." I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." So that's how I got my start.
Well, that's pretty cool. I could never form any sort of perceivable note on an oboe, so that was a no-bo for me.
That's right.
So that's diving a little further into that. What did your parents think when you told them that you're going to play euphonium?
Oh, they loved it. And in fact, I have 3 older brothers, and with the 4 of us, they said, "You're either going to take piano lessons as a younger kid, like, 2nd, 3rd grade, get started. And if you don't want to do that, then you're joining the band when you get to junior high or, middle school." And as a kid, I cared more about sports, and that's what I wanted to do. So I didn't want to take piano. But I did want to join the band. That just the whole concept of it seemed very interesting to me. So yeah, I mean, they were very supportive of it from the beginning.
So did your 3 older brothers, did they play musical instruments?
Yeah, one of them played the saxophone and also the bass drum in the high school marching band, and that was the extent of that. And then my other 2 played piano, but they didn't join the band. So I was the only one who's sort of continued beyond high school with music.
So why do you think your parents had focused y'all into learning a musical instrument?
Well, I think they understood the value. My father was a middle school principal, and he was my principal in middle school, junior high, I guess as they called it back then. But Robert Meixner was his name, and he actually received an award from the Illinois. That's where I'm from, Illinois Music Educator Association administrator, in terms of support of music in his program. So he, and of course my mother as well, who played some piano, understood the value of music, and just how I believe important it is, and they believed as well, in the overall development of a student in all of the academics, of course.
So when did you first start taking private lessons?
Well, I didn't actually take formal private lessons, regular private lessons, until I got to college. And I went to Western Illinois University. I studied with Dr. Hugo Magliocco, trombone euphonium professor there, amazing guy, great teacher, great player. But I wasn't a music major. I was actually business. Organizational management was my thing. But I got scholarship. I was a good player. I got a scholarship to participate. And so going through middle school and high school, I didn't really take regular lessons. However, I did have some great teachers. Joseph Goebel was my junior high band director, who's also a fine euphonium player and euphonium teacher. And so I got help with him along the way. And then I had a fantastic high school band director as well, David Wetmore, who was a trumpet player and a brass player. And each of them gave me some individual work along the way. So as they say, we're all product of our teaching that we received, and I just am very fortunate to have had that in my upbringing. But yeah, I was, in terms of my interest in lessons and such, perhaps maybe a later bloomer, if you will, than maybe some other folks.
So it's interesting. You went into what you said, Western Illinois, correct?
Yeah.
Just making that sure. So you graduated high school as a euphonium player and student, obviously, and you went and proceeded with a business degree, yet you're so successful in euphonium. That's what I really want to highlight here. That's amazing. That's exactly what I had hoped to envision, to uncover and help showcase that it is possible that you're going from the talent that you've developed over those formative years, and then went to college as something not necessarily totally different, but you still came back to the roots of your talent, what your upbringing, kind of like the Bible says. raise up a child is the way she should go. And so, what year, or did you change that degree at all during college? Or did
Yeah,
you?
so right when I left high school, I loved playing euphonium, and I loved being in band, and I played some trombone as well. And so I wanted to continue with that, but I just wasn't sure if I wanted to be a band director. And I just wasn't sure if I wanted music to be my career. So I started off on this business path. And I got about 2, 3 years into it. And I did what I tell my students now that they should do, which is to follow their heart and their passion. And that's where my heart and my passion were, was in music, particularly playing the euphonium. And I had success, along the way. And so I decided to change paths. However, I was close enough to finishing the business degree that I stuck with that and completed the degree. Was very active on my instrument the whole time. And I went straight into music education school at the University of Kentucky, where I studied with Dr. Skip Gray. And that's where the euphonium playing became a lot more serious. And I was started to do the competitions and getting more involved in that. So I really didn't get into really serious euphonium, I mean, I took my lessons very seriously when I was in business school, and I developed a lot under Dr. Magliocco for sure. But it wasn't until I went to music school when I started doing the Falcone competitions and things like that. So yeah, so my path is not as direct and I would say not common, right, for most musicians.
I don't know. From the high schoolers that I see graduating from where my kids go to school and attend, is a lot of them are choosing to step away from band, but they get into their first semester and go, okay, yeah, I'm going back to band. And so when you graduated with your degree in business and you took that undergrad and you sought another undergrad in music education, how did the transfer work out between Western Illinois University and Kentucky?
Yeah, so a lot of the gen eds transferred in. Of course, I didn't have any of or most of the music courses that were required, of the education courses. So I actually finished the coursework in 3 years because it wasn't, I didn't have, there were sequences of courses I had to take, but most of the general education curriculum I was able to transfer over. And then I student taught that first semester of the fourth year. So I suppose it took 3.5 to get through the program. So yeah, so that's how that was. It was a smooth transition.
That's really awesome. That's really awesome. When did you first realize that you really wanted to pursue this as a dream career, dream job? Was that in college or was that earlier?
Right. Well, it was during the business degree, like I mentioned, that's when I realized a couple of years into it that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to play euphonium and I wanted to teach band, which is what I did following the degree at Kentucky.
That's awesome. During your junior high years and going in through high school, did you ever create a foundation of warm-ups? Not necessarily what you've had during your professional career, but did you have a base of a basic warm-up that you kind of put yourself through during those years to get you even set for college?
Right. Well, I wasn't as serious of a student at that time, and I didn't have aspirations of going into music school during my high school years.
Okay.
I did learn from my band directors, some of the Remington long tones and lip flexibilities and articulation and such. But it wasn't until I got into, my freshman year of business school where Dr. Magliocco sort of set me on a routine, which I would consider to be fairly standard in the industry. I was into the Remingtons, and doing the different lip flexibilities and articulation exercises and range studies and things like that.
That's awesome. Okay. Um, do you ever, or have you ever adapted any type of breathing techniques or yoga or stretching before and or after practice rehearsals, whether it's during high school, college, uh, after college, and then through your professional career?
Yeah, I um have always done some breathing exercises. Um those were sort of, preached from the beginning and through my studies, continuing into grad school and such, and then, different master classes and other folks I've learned from. I, worked a bit with Pat Sheridan, of course, with his
Jim.
breathing gym, and done some of that. These days, I just get as much FaceTime as I can. I suppose we'll get into that.
Sure.
What my career as a conductor is not, as much, but yeah, in terms of yoga, I never really did much of that. Um, stretching certainly a little bit. Perhaps I need that more now as my body ages, as all ours do every day, right?
So what equipment did you start on first with Euphonium? Did you have your own instrument or did you have one from the band?
Yeah, no, the school, it was back in 6th grade. I don't really remember what I played on. But I know that in junior high, I played on a Yamaha 321. And then I actually played that all the way through high school, or most of high school. And then I bought my first instrument was a Yamaha 641. And I played on that for all my time at Western Illinois. And then when I went to Kentucky, Dr. Gray, sort of we tried out some different instruments, and I went to the Willson 2900.
Mhm.
So, and that's the instrument I've been playing ever since, and I still play now.
So did
So,
you actually purchase the horn when you were under Dr. Skip?
yeah, I purchased the Willson, and then after a number of years of that instrument, I purchased another one about 10 years ago, but it's the same model.
Right.
So.
What kind of mouthpieces did you progress from the 6.5 AL, I suppose? Yeah, yeah. 6.5 AL, and then what did you progress through and finally settle on during your professional career?
Yeah, so 6.5 AL, I'm pretty sure that's what I was on, in the early years. In fact, yes, that's what I was on. And then I switched over to a Dennis Wick, and I had some, different rims and cups and things, and I did that for a while. And then I ended up switching to the BB1, and I've been on the Brian Bowman BB1, the DG mouthpiece, and I've been on that for some time. But actually, with Greg Black, I'm going to be working with him on getting a different mouthpiece that looks like one of their guys, Ben Strickland. Actually plays cornet in my brass band because Greg Black is based here in North Carolina, and so I've been talking with him quite a bit, and a lot of the players in my band are people all over the world, right? They've been getting into the Greg Black mouth. Those guys are brilliant, and so I'm actually probably here in the next couple of weeks going to be heading down and doing some work with them. So
Trying it out. That's awesome. Remember, 21 days or so to try it out and see if it, fits the bill.
that's right.
That's
They get
really
past that honeymoon period, right?
precisely. But these kids, the kids that are going to be on these calls may not know what that honeymoon period is just yet. Um, so um, when you first started to learn, and did you have any kind of did you utilize a tuner, a metronome at home?
Yeah. I purchased a tuner. Of course, we didn't, showing my age a bit. Um, and here I am getting caught on work email right during the middle of this interview. I just turned
Oh,
it off.
that's
It's a
fine.
good opportunity to do that. Um, So I'm sorry, what was the question again? I just got
Metronomes and tuners.
yeah, we didn't have smartphones back then to have it all in one sort of device. But yeah, I had metronome and tuner that I used.
Well, we also didn't have the internet.
That's right. There's that too. Now we're
Right?
really showing our age here.
Well, me as well. Me as well. It's really, really fascinating how these apps and everything has come about. Do you utilize or refer anyone to any apps to utilize currently for their practice?
Yeah, there's so many. I can't keep track of them all that are being developed. I got turned on to that tonal energy a number of years ago, and it's pretty much has everything you need. The tuner is very sensitive, which is very helpful. So that's my go-to, that tonal energy.
Do you use any decibel meters or restrictive breathing equipment or anything like that within your practice, or have your
I used to. I just sort of have some mixed feelings about some of these restrictive breathing devices. I think if what you're doing is creating tension in any way, muscular tension, I think there's some worry there and some things to be concerned about. So I try to keep everything as relaxed as I can, and I don't mouthpiece buzz anymore either, and I don't teach that. I do utilize the mouthpiece buzzing for high pitch, high range accuracy. I do think that's very helpful. I sort of, over the years, I've bought into the Pat Sheridan sing, buzz, play. Sing the pattern with the piano to make sure you're keeping yourself honest. And then, buzz it lightly, freely, relaxed, to get it in your ear and you play. So that method, it's not possible for it not to get at least a little bit better in terms of that. But I've started to turn away from the mouthpiece buzzing, and I've had a lot of conversations with folks over the years. There's some other brass teachers who are sort of doing that. I'm not convinced that's what we're actually doing when we're playing the instrument. That we're actually buzzing the mouthpiece, particularly in the low range. It's just
right.
So I don't really do that as much either.
So when you're going through your euphonium, so I try to combine the two, euphonium, any elements of or sayings, principles, or teachings that you learned from Dr. Skip Gray, Dr. Bowman, Dr. Magliano, any like prolific principles that were imparted on you that you still like apply and teach yourself?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I think we're all products of our teachers and what they imparted and the knowledge and wisdom that they imparted upon us. And I find a lot of what I do, particularly with Dr. Bowman, having studied with him for my master's and doctorate at North Texas, that things that I found successful, I find myself repeating, different pedagogical elements and things like that, little isms perhaps along the way as well. So yeah, and of course, through our own study and experience, we develop our own methods. But a lot of that stems from what we have learned, at least certainly for me, from others. So I am most certainly a product of great teaching that I received.
Well, most certainly. I was reading an interview that you conducted on in regards to praxis. You care to elaborate on praxis real quick before I dive into the quote I found?
Individual practice sessions.
Oh, praxis. Your duo.
Praxis. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's an album that we did about, I think this is about 10 years ago now, man. It's crazy. It's been that long.
right?
Well, I partnered, it was soon after I moved here to North Carolina, and I partnered with Euphonium, or Euphonium, percussion virtuoso Nathan Daughtry. He's a fantastic composer. Anyone in the band world would know him, and certainly anyone in the percussion world. But he was adjunct percussion faculty here at High Point, and we met. And of course, I'd known his name, and he was interested in doing some things. And so I'm always interested in doing new things and trying different things. And so we started working together a bit. He started writing some great music. I was able to get some very fine composers, Stephen Barr, Fernando Dedos, others to commission some works for euphonium and percussion quartet or percussion quintet. And I'm really proud of the album. There's some great music on there. At that time, all new music outside of the Samuel Adler 4 dialogues. You can't do a euphonium percussion album, without putting that in there. And just collaborating with some really great musicians. And I think we brought some great new music out there. And I just really enjoyed working with percussion. I think I've said this, maybe in an interview that you're referencing. I enjoy playing recital with piano, but there are, in terms of sounds, timbres that are capable, it is limited, right?
Right.
But with percussion, it literally is limitless to the amount of different sounds and things. So I think it has a great interest to the listener and the performer. It was just a lot of fun. So, and I've performed a number of those pieces, of course, over the years. Since that date, but
and this is a plug for a specific piece that I really am fascinated by. It's called Spitfire by Nathan Daughtry. Just go check it out. It's phenomenal. I'll put a link below. Just a really quick shout out on that. Phenomenal work.
Yeah, it's a great piece. We got a lot of mileage out of that over the years, performed it at various venues. So
that's amazing. Including tuba as well.
I think he has come out with other version that is for tuba.
No, I saw a version with you playing with the tuba and Nathan himself.
Yeah.
I had stumbled upon it after clicking through a few different of you to get a more prolific standpoint on your career, and I stumbled upon that one, including tuba. I was like, "Whoa, that's cool! That's really cool." I'll add that one in the links below as well. That's really awesome. I think you hit everything, like the essence of that interview with David Brubeck, or on his website. You really shined a amazing light and did an awesome tribute to Dr. Bowman, and especially through being willing to do this interview on our Euphonium Summit for Farm for Dreams in service through music to others. Yeah. And so I really appreciate your willingness.
Happy to be here. Yeah.
Thank you for stopping by and being part of this. So when did you start competing in competitions? Was it all region solo ensemble in high school, junior high, middle school, or was it the Falcone Festival, or was it both? When you
growing up through the public schools and my band experience, I did the solo and ensemble things, and I did all state. In Illinois at that time, you were only eligible for all state your junior and senior year, which I thought was pretty good. You get more kids opportunities, so I did that. And that sort of thing. So I was doing that, and then, but it really wasn't until I got into music school at Kentucky when I started doing the Falcone things and other things, other competitions and such.
What other competitions do you want to dive into that now, or do you want to hit that on that other question we have?
No, regional competitions, ITech, stuff like that. back then there wasn't as many opportunities, as there are now. And I see a lot of these competitions that are out there. So, but when I was an undergrad in music ed, I was just, I'm ready, let's do it. Learn new music, go do competitions, try to better myself, to, compete not just with students at my own university, of which there were great ones, but sort of throw yourself into a larger pool.
Right.
And that's how we grow, right? That's how we excel.
That's awesome. What are three things that you wished you would have applied then that you know now?
You mean in high school or college or
What you
no?
know now as a connoisseur of your collaborative experience, your journey, what could you take back to your former years? What would you tell yourself? Three tips, three whatever it is, three things that you wish you would have had during those years.
Yeah, well, I wish I would have had the musicianship that I do now, of course, but that comes with age and
It does.
seasoning. I think, what I tell my students now is just immerse yourself in music and as much as you can. And then, of course, today, there's just so many recordings and things, but that's great. But we all know how recordings are, like they're not real. They're spliced and put together, right, and edited and things. So you have to go hear live music, and support live music and hear those things. I would have certainly be preaching to young Brian about that. Just sort of all of the playing techniques and warm up type things that I didn't know back then that I have learned over the years.
What would be a couple of those techniques and warm-ups that maybe the beginners don't have access to before this summit, and they will go seek after and start applying these tools immediately or within the next week within their routines? What would be those go-to foundational elements for warm-ups, for lips flexibility and such like that?
Well, I will say, and again, this is for me, right?
Right,
And
of course.
everyone's different and have different responses. But when I was that age, I used to do the Remington long tones. For me, I found the more effective sort of long tone type warm ups are. I really Dr. Bowman introduced me to the violin lip flexibilities for all brass instruments book. And I really enjoy those opening exercises, very slow lip slurs up and down, even if it's just within an octave. I feel like if I'm warming up on the Remingtons, for me, F, E flat, F, really slowly, of course. After about 5 minutes, I've played maybe the range of a fourth or a
Right.
fifth. Kind of locks me up, more than anything else. But stretching over an octave or a tenth, really slowly up and down, you're incorporating the lip slur, but also feels like it's stretching me out. Another thing that's really worked for me and my students over the years is a lot of low range warm up playing, just getting some lyrical thing, melodic, tuba, bass trombone methods. Of course, there are a lot of those. I feel like to be able to play in that range and for it to even sound remotely good, the command of air and just the mass of air that's needed down in that range, you take that and carry it through all the other ranges, and it's just going to be you're going to be that much more effective of a player in
So
terms of.
basically work lower to go higher.
Yeah, I tell my students the low range leads, the high range follows. And so that's when I'm warming up, that's one of the first things I do is get down into that range and just play beautiful melodies. It gets my air going in a way that I wouldn't otherwise do. Even as someone who's been around a while, knowing how to use my air and more efficiently than I used to. But That I think can be as much of a teacher in and of itself as could be. So yeah, then that would be a couple things.
Well, that leads really well into this next question about adding in the practice, the phasing and articulation when it comes to learning how to effectively single tongue with the staccato, the the legatos, even to double and triple tonguing. What processes did you start utilizing when you first started, and then when did you learn double, triple? I know that's a couple different questions there. Double, triple tonguing.
Yeah, just with single articulation, just on one repeated note, just again, we're talking, I like to just isolate one variable at a time.
Mhm.
And then, then moving up and down range. I try to keep everything as tenuto and legato as I can at first. I always feel like, if you start from that perspective, it's much easier to create sort of a harder articulation. But if we start from the tenuto side of things and work our way back into that, so that's one of the things I have my students do, and I try to do, every day. In terms of the multiple tonguing, it wasn't until I got to college, when I was 18 years old, I started to learn that. And again, the Arbin, I feel is a pretty systematic way of moving through a lot of the different multiple articulations. But again, as light as can be. I use a G syllable, daga, 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 before I move into the ticka, 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 right? Again, if we're starting from more of a legato perspective, it's easier to shore up the articulation into more, a shorter articulation or more coarse or articulation from that perspective. And I feel like we learn more quickly, and we can get the mechanics of it down more quickly. And that's for triple tonguing as well. I use the da da ga, not the da ga da. It's just, but I have students that come in who've learned it one way or the other, and if they've been doing it a lot and it sounds fine, I'm just like,
Let's
use
roll.
what you can use it. I might not do that, but for you, it seems to be working. If it's not working, then we'll try something different. But
Right. Right. And what about phrasing, especially from a conducting standpoint, where you find yourself on the podium a lot more in this stage of life? Phrasing is a lot of different interpretations. What does it mean to you?
yeah, well, there are multiple ways to approach any passage, right?
Mhm.
As you said, I'm far more into the conducting realm now than I was 10 years ago. Certainly, I conduct a symphony orchestra, I conduct a wind ensemble, I conduct a brass band, and as I'm doing that, I do use reference recordings, and it's shocking to me, certainly at least when I was first getting going in the conducting world, how different of interpretations from masterful conductors, and they're all valid, and it's just sort of it's sort of different. In terms of phrasing, I tell my students, sing it, sing a line that the way you think it should go. Get the instrument off your face, remove those variables in terms of executing the instrument and that sort of thing, and sing and mimic yourself, in terms of that when you put the machine up to your face. Um so yeah, I think that there needs to be, and you may come back the next day and do it differently, and that's fine. Could be a full moon, feel different.
Right.
So I approach, pieces that I'm playing now that I haven't played in 20 years. It's like, wow, I'm approaching it a lot differently now.
So when you first started to record eh, as identifying yourself as an artist, actually that would be a more prominent question I have. When did you first believe yourself to be an artist level euphonium player?
Yeah, I think it was when I um started with my music degree at Kentucky, I think is when I really started to get very serious about playing. And I was very fortunate to have a teacher, Dr. Skip Gray, who was very supportive and very encouraging. And he would tell me, you're an artist level player, and this is the direction that we need you to go. And I thought to myself, oh, I didn't think I was that. And I wasn't even sure I really believed him when he said it, um, but he was so encouraging, and he actually helped me get a undergraduate research grant to cover a lot of the cost of an album. It was the first album I did, called Genesis, music for euphonium and piano. There's a tuba ensemble accompaniment piece and a wind band piece on there as well. And it's at that point I started doing the competitions and exposing myself to sort of the greater world of euphonium and music in general. And I thought, yeah, maybe I can do this.
Well, that's really awesome. You hit on something that I never really considered when talking to others. I have we have jointly a colleague that is going in progress of recording his first euphonium album, and never considered telling him what you just said, that Dr. Skip Gray, he helped you find a undergraduate research grant. I never considered that aspect for funding of an album.
Yeah, well, and I'm an academic. I'm in academia, right? That's where my career is. And, in terms of how we're evaluated in terms of, scholarly work and creative work and research for musicians, recording is a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And so that's research. And for musicians, and I think, folks in other academic fields, the sciences and whatnot, they perhaps don't know that or realize that, or it can be new to them when presented in that way. But yeah, that's how we build it as research, and it is. And
that's amazing. That right there was one of the most valuable nuggets, I think. I'm curious to see what the replies are underneath going forward from when this actually drops to through the ages, and seeing where these interviews and these journeys really start to interweave. And yeah, I learned this from Brian Meixner, or from Dr. Adam Frey, or doctor, or performing artist, or wherever. It's going to be really cool to see how this really proliferates in other aspects. Very exciting. Boy, I'm getting shivers. It's really cool. Thank you for diving deep on that. That's really so going into more of the conducting aspect. You can bring in the euphonium as well and your brass band. How important is sight reading to you? Loaded question.
Well, as a professional performer, it's critical, to be able to do that. I can't tell you how many gigs I've sat down. They put the book in front of you and the lights come on and the audience is looking up and you just got to play, right? So to a student out there, I would say you got to do it, and again, it's just a good sight reader is someone who is accomplished at a variety of I mean, when we're reading music, we are interpreting symbols on the page, right? Rhythms, we're doing instantaneous mathematics as we're going through, the physical elements of playing. So, someone who's a good reader is someone who's exposed themselves to a lot of different, music. And I really believe, and this is something that I did as a younger guy. When I went to Western Illinois, I got the trombone out and got some lessons from Dr. Magliocco, and then worked on a lot myself. And I played in the jazz ensemble. And that did wonders for me in terms of, because I was like, whoa, this is very different, right? And a lot of the rhythmic complexity is far beyond what a lot of classical musicians have to
Mhm.
work through. So, and as a conductor, that really was a great experience. And I enjoy jazz. I enjoy it. I'm not a jazz musician. I would never call myself anything remotely close to a jazz musician, but having that experience certainly helped, because a lot of as a conductor of an orchestra, and orchestras around the country right now, I mean, close to half the time, depending on the orchestra, sometimes more than half the time, you're playing pops. And if you don't understand jazz style and you can't read in that style, it's, good luck to you, so yeah, I do think it's important. I think it's sort of an indication of skill level on a variety of different elements of playing. But yeah, as a any student out there should be working on that. But again, the more music you're exposed to, the more music you read, the better of a sight reader you're going to be. If all you're doing is playing your Bordoni etudes and Arbin exercises and Clark solos or whatever. I mean, you have to get yourself involved in as many different styles of playing as you can. And euphonium, it can be challenged. I went the trombone route in terms of another instrument. A lot of people do the tuba thing. I tried tuba when I was at North Texas, and I was terrible. I just couldn't. I couldn't get it to work. It was great for my breathing, but I did embouchure and everything. It was not a beautiful thing by any stretch. But playing as much stuff as you can,
Well, that leads
just
really well into you mentioned you picked up trombone, and part of that interview that I was reading, it talks a little bit about jazz. Did you learn any elements of improvisation while learning trombone?
a little, but it's definitely not my forte. I did experiment some and learned a little bit from who I was working with, but that just my focuses were in other arenas, and I just didn't really get as much into that. But I will say that jazz musicians are probably the musicians. A great jazz musician, a great improviser is who I really respect the most, maybe. Just it's sprinkled pixie dust kind of thing is how, for me, it's like I know how they're trained in these different things, um yeah, folks, if they can do that, I think that makes you a more complete musician, certainly.
Definitely provides a lot of different avenues, and I'm looking forward to interviewing one of the up and coming, and you make mention of his work actually in that interview, and his name comes up every single interview as Ryan McGeorge.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
A smile comes to me. He's a good friend.
oh, he is a good friend.
Amazing musician.
Yes,
Amazing musician.
phenomenal.
Oh my goodness. And so many different elements. And he's very creative, and he's always doing new things. Of course, he plays in the Marine Band in Washington, D.C., President's Own, so that's just a testament to his, classical playing and whatnot. But no, yeah, you need to get him on here. That guy's brilliant.
Yeah. So how important is solfege, and maybe perhaps numerical notation during your career?
Yeah, in my undergrad training, we were taught on numbers. We weren't taught on solfege. I did, of course, learn that later, but I don't really incorporate solfege much into my private teaching. I think singing and with pitch accurate singing is, of course, very important to any musician, particularly a brass player. But I that's just not something I've done a lot with.
That's fair. I hear a lot of the different aspects throughout the world, and so some more so than others, and that's totally fine. And So when did you start teaching others how to play euphonium?
Lessons.
Lessons or just in any facet or avenue that you actually noticed yourself starting to teach certain elements.
I remember when I was in high school, I can't remember if I was a junior or a senior, but we had friends of the family that were good friends. And this younger guy, he was like 3 or 4 years younger than me, and he played euphonium. And they said, "Oh, you want to teach him lessons?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I've never taught lessons. I don't know." They said, "Oh, just get together and play his band music with him." All right, the kid came over, and that's one thing I learned is, sometimes we just have to keep our mouths shut in lessons and model. No, listen, play that's with it. So, we used to do that, but I do, I do have a little funny story. I grew up in this town called Macomb, Illinois. That's where Western Illinois was. It's my hometown, town of about 20,000. And names that I know a lot of your listeners will know, or they should anyway. Mark Carlson, a great euphonium player, and Paul Carlson, great tuba player, Dallas Brass, teaches in Grand Valley State, I think it is up in Michigan. But they were younger than I was, and they were both from Macomb. I know there's something in the water there about low brass, but my very first private student, when I got to college, was Paul Carlson. And look what he's done now, in spite of whatever direction improper direction I sent him on. So he was my first regular like weekly lesson kid, but Paul's and every time I see him, I bring that up and we laugh. But so yeah, that's kind of when I got going with some of that. When I became a music ed student, it was like, that's how I paid my way through school, man. Sometimes I look back like, how did I have time with that? But I did teach a lot of lessons, starting when in college.
Where did you student teach at by chance?
Lafayette High School in Lexington, Kentucky. The storied band program there. In terms of marching band, I think they won like a decade straight or something crazy like that of state marching band championships. And then I also taught I can't remember the feeder middle school. I can't remember the name of it, but that was part of it as well. But actually, and one of the directors at the high school, Dr. Terry McGee, he's retired at this point, but he was a great euphonium player. And he played in the Lexington Brass Band under the direction of Dr. Ronald Holtz. And Skip Gray also was a conductor, a co-conductor of that for a number of years. And so he was my supervising teacher, for that. And so it's just sort of a nice little euphonium connection there. It was fun.
Oh, absolutely. That's really fantastic. That did Dr. Skip Gray form that internship for you, or did the kind of the HR office at the band for the band program?
Yeah, well, it was a student teaching experience, which is required, of all music education students, and certainly in that period, they helped place me into that setting. I think my relationship with Terry, Dr. McGee, played a role in that. And I can't remember how all that went down, but I'm pretty sure I requested that.
That's really awesome.
And he's such a good teacher. And yeah, again, I've been so fortunate to just every time I worked under somebody, it's just been, the director of bands at Western Illinois, Dr. John Dougal, Richard Clary, who's now at Florida State. He was the conductor of the Wind Symphony and director of bands at Kentucky when I was there. When I was in North Texas, of course, Brian Bowman and Eugene Corporon. I mean, I don't need to, you just say the name right there and so yeah, but Terry, Dr. McGee was a part of that, certainly.
That's more than incredible. So wrapping up with Dr. Brian Meixner, thank you so much for coming on to the Farm for Dreams Euphonium Summit. Would you care to impart any final thoughts, sayings, principles besides the service through playing and music with Dr. Brian Bowman, would there be one more tip or one more principle you'd like to leave our viewers?
Yeah, I as euphonium players, there's not a lot of options that we have, in terms of being professional performers. I'm a diabetic. I'm a type 1 diabetic, so I'm not eligible for the military. So I knew from the beginning, even though my graduate degrees were in euphonium performance with a minor in instrumental conducting, that I would be going sort of some other routes. But I have seen students over the years who do the euphonium performance thing, undergrad up through graduate, and don't develop other skills. And I just, I developed some trombone skills. I went to music ed. I studied conducting, and now I am a conductor. As I mentioned, I do university orchestra, university wind ensemble, a professional brass band. I coach chamber music. I teach conducting at the university here. I have that business degree, which has come in handy because I'm not only am I the conductor of the North Carolina Brass Band, but I'm also the executive director of the North Carolina Brass Bands, which is essentially running a business, right? We're a nonprofit. We have a board of directors, but the executive director is responsible for the day-to-day business elements of the organization. But all of these things have played a big role in my life. I wouldn't have an opportunity in academia to do the things I do, which is a great life. I have great students. I have great colleagues. I enjoy teaching, what I do. I'm getting to do the things that I've always wanted to do, and I decided to get into music. But all of that being said, when you're on the podium in an ensemble situation, it's you and your musicianship. That's what you've got when you stand up there. You're reacting in a rehearsal setting. Of course, you're not entirely reacting to what's happening. You're guiding them to the direction that you want to go, working with them, right? The musicians. But in rehearsal, you're instantaneously reacting to what you hear. You stop when you hear something you don't like and you correct it. You give them advice to correct. When I'm up there, it's Dr. Bowman in my mind, in Dr. Magliocco, Dr. Gray, these different private teachers I had. I really feel like my skill and any success I've had as a conductor has been in big part due to my success on the euphonium. You're standing on the podium, you're telling other people how to play, right? If you can't play, then what credibility do you have? And how do you teach someone else to do things that you never learned to do or cannot do? And so I think the basis of your career in music is the musicianship that you develop, and you develop that through, in my mind, through the private study on your instrument and your artist level and in your skill level. And then when you're up there, or you're teaching in a private lesson or working with a chamber group, which I do also, you can react to things and you have good things to say. You have options to give to them. You're drawing on experience and these different things. So in no way am I saying, hey, don't focus so much on your playing. You have other things, right? You should be doing if you want to make a career, right? But what I'm saying is you do need to be focused on your playing. You do need to be focused on these, and take as many opportunities as you can to go to as many master classes as you can, to take lessons with as many people as you can, which is what I did over the years. And you walk out of every single one with something, right? Some nugget of like, oh man, the way she said that was amazing, or the way he did this, the way he approached this. And that just goes into the toolkit, man. It goes into the noggin, and it makes you a better musician overall. But if you're sort of living in your own bubble, which I do see little bit more these days. I don't know, maybe that's just my perspective, but I have talked to other, colleagues from around the country and around the world, who sort of relay the same thing. There's students, they've got these recordings and YouTube, they just sit around and listen. You have to get out. And not only are you learning, but you're developing connections. I can't think of any success I've had, any job I've attained, that it's been just because of my skill in artistry. Because people I've met and people I know who see that in me, right? Oh, I heard this guy play a recital, man. And, it was a whiz bang recital. I think he'd probably be a good teacher. Let's give him a shot, kind of thing. So, soapbox, here I am.
Right.
But I think it's just important for folks to know that. And even though I'm not, as focused on the euphonium anymore as I used to be, it's still a big part of what I enjoy in my life. And again, it's what has been the catalyst for much of what I do. And so I think folks need to young folks need to understand this and diversifying your portfolio, as it were, and your skill set.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Brian Meixner, for joining us today, and possibly for future conversations and perhaps a live summit in the near future. Thank you so much.
I had to do it. Well, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Awesome.